Welcome back to the Q Drops podcast. Today we're going to answer your questions, which you've been sending in to us for the past 2 weeks. And we're going to try to get to them all, but we might not. There's a lot. Just a quick note first that you can actually catch this episode on YouTube and see our smiling faces there in video format. So go check that out at the link in our show notes. And you can also get an ad-free version of this episode in video format on our Patreon, as well as ad-free versions of all of the other episodes, plus bonus content from some of our interviews that we've posted so far, including video from those. So you can actually like put a face to a name for some of our guests. The link to that is in our show notes. And of course, when you become a patron, you support this podcast and ensure that we can keep making it. So, the link to that is in our show notes. But other than that, next week we have season 2 starting with an episode featuring 2 brothers whose father ran for office in Colorado. So that's quite, obviously, QAnon father. So that's quite interesting. I hope that you are subscribed so you can be notified when that goes live. But yeah, we asked you to send in your questions for the last couple of weeks, and you did that. So let's hop on them. John is going to answer, or he's going to ask the first question, and we're probably going to alternate after that.
What made you start this podcast?
I think I've probably answered this one before a few times, but it is the experience of realizing that my parents went down the QAnon rabbit hole, the frustration of that, and not really knowing what to do with that frustrated energy, the anger and the disappointment and all of that. And like throughout my life, I've always kind of dealt with things by talking about them. My father he was a therapist. He's retired now, a counselor. And so we were always encouraged to talk everything out. And so that's, I think, kind of what I'm doing here. It's something that I had a lot to say about, and we have a podcast production company, but we didn't have a podcast. So we were like figuring out what we should do in terms of a podcast. And this kind of just was the thing that we were always talking about. So why not turn it into a podcast? What about you, John? Do you have a different answer?
It kind of felt natural at the time. We were kicking around ideas to start a podcast, and we were going through this with your parents, and it just kind of, I mean, when you suggested it, it just, we obviously contemplated how much we wanted to talk about your situation publicly, but it just felt kind of like a no-brainer to do this since it was so, we had so much firsthand experience with it going on right now, and combined with our interest in podcast production and all that, it just seemed like a good fit for now.
Yeah. Yes. So what is your favorite episode, John?
I don't know if I can pick one favorite because they're so, I feel kind of connection to a few in different ways, but if I had to kind of narrow it down a bit, I mean, I kind of felt the most connected to Hale. I think it was also because it was when we first started getting started with this, and his story was very touching, and I felt a parental kind of connection, I guess. And then, I mean, obviously Kurt's story was incredible. It's pretty hard not to, be really amazed by that story. So that one for sure. And then, I mean, Josh as well. That one was, he was just such a well-spoken person. It was, it was just really interesting. It was fun, for lack of a better word, to work on. If you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think my list is similar. I liked my favorite is Kurt, just because of that's the one that I kind of like all of them kind of sit with me and I think about them and it's like, it bothers me. But Kurt's kind of just was like in my head for a long time and I couldn't really shake it. It was very just upsetting and shocking, But I also really liked Kurt. Like he was just such a nice person and just like I just felt so bad for him. What he had gone through. And then Josh, of course. Josh is the type of person I definitely think like we could sit down and have a beer with him and have a really good time. Like he's got like I feel like he's got like the dry sarcastic wit and like he's got a really good he's just got a really good brain, it seems like. I think we would have a lot of fun with him. And of course Hale and David, they both were like, oh my God, I just want to adopt you and give you a room in my house, kind of thing. But yeah, those were my favorites for sure.
Which episode was the hardest emotionally?
Fuck, they were all hard. But definitely Kurt was challenging, but also Jane. Just I don't know what it's like to be the target of racial hatred, and I'm not saying that her mother was doing that to her, but just having to cope with seeing that kind of content come through from your mom and your mom not really being aware of what she was doing. I don't know, that really, I can only imagine that hurt a lot. But also Hale for sure.
Yeah, for me.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, all of those, obviously, but actually for me, the hardest to get through was Brendan. That one, I had a really hard time, editing it. You're going back and forth over the same clips over and over and over again. I really just felt for him and what he was dealing with his family and his kids and his spouse. And that was just, I felt like it just felt so hopeless for his situation. And that one was probably the hardest for me.
Yeah, that one was challenging. And he was another just super sweet person. And like I remember thinking when we were actually interviewing him, like I wish there was a way that we could like crowdfund getting him out of his mom's house. But that was challenging for sure.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one. Do you think it's better to cut our cues off and go no contact or not? Do you think it's better to stay in touch and do what you can?
Yeah, I don't think there's a straight answer to this. I mean, it's going to be different for everybody. We've talked about this many times on the podcast. I mean, you have to do what's right for you. There's no one size fits all answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about you?
I think for me, you shouldn't sacrifice your own mental well-being or physical well-being to maintain a relationship with somebody who no longer is concerned with you or how you feel or your wishes. You shouldn't. So if you are in a situation where you have a QAnon loved one and you are negatively affected, like overwhelmingly so negatively affected mentally, or you feel that you're in any kind of physical danger, you need to cut the ties in that situation, I think. So I think it's fair to say that you need to. But if it's like my situation where my parents, they respect my boundaries for the most part. Every once in a while, my dad will let something slip, and I can excuse that because my dad, he's been diagnosed with early dementia, and he's not completely he doesn't have the use of all of his faculties anymore. I mean, he's still very coherent. Like, you wouldn't know talking to him. You wouldn't know. He's very coherent. He's not very forgetful. Every once in a while, he'll struggle with a word or something like that. But every once in a while, when we're talking or when we're together, he'll let something slip. And it's like, I don't want to talk about this. Like, for instance, the other day we went for dinner. You were out of town, but we went for dinner. Me and my son went for dinner with my parents, and my dad. We were talking about radon because here in the southern interior of BC, radon is a thing that a lot of houses seem to have heightened levels of. So radon is a radioactive gas, I guess, that is emitted from soil when uranium breaks down. I don't really understand the science. I just know that we have it in high concentrations here in southern interior BC, and because our houses are so well insulated for the winter, it tends to accumulate like in our basements and stuff like that. And so it's become like this big thing in our community to test your basement for radon because there's health implications. It can heighten your risk of cancers, etc. So you test for radon, and then you have to mitigate the radon in your house if you have these heightened levels of it. And so we were talking about that at dinner, and my dad says, I have my own theories about what radon is. And I just looked at him dead in the eye and I said, I do not want to know your theory. And we just moved on with the conversation. So like little things like that will happen. And it can be frustrating, but it's very rare, and it's not really affecting my mental health anymore. It was in the beginning when we were going back and forth and arguing about their beliefs and their conspiracy theories and the way that they saw the world. When we were arguing back and forth, it was exhausting, and it had to stop one way or another. And if they weren't willing to respect my boundaries, I would have had to cut it off for my own mental health, my own well-being, and my own ability to be a mom and to be a wife and to do my job, right? So I would have had to, but luckily they did, for the most part, respect my boundaries. And my dad didn't push that day when we went for dinner. He didn't push. He said that. I said, I don't want to hear it. And that was the end of it. So I can handle that. That is something I can handle, especially to maintain a relationship with people who I love so much and who gave me such an amazing life. But I think when it's so overwhelming and it's constant and they won't respect your boundaries and they just push it into your life and you're feeling like this is affecting my ability to be a good friend, be a good mother or a good father, to be a good spouse, to be a functioning employee or run a business that you might have. Like if it's getting in the way of your life, you need to pull away. You need to tell them, that person, that there's a hard boundary here, and if you keep crossing it, I'm out. And in that situation, it's not you making the decision, it's them. Because if you make clear what that boundary is, and you make clear what the consequences are, and they cross it, they're making that decision, not you.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, if you're constantly battling with them, I mean, that's not good for the relationship either. if they're constantly trying to convince you of this, and you're constantly trying to tell them that what they're thinking is ridiculous, like you're kind of reaching a point where it's not like a let's agree to disagree kind of thing, because I think that doesn't really apply to this, but it's just not, it's not healthy for anyone.
Yeah.
Right. You have to kind of just say, this isn't healthy. This isn't good for me. This isn't good for you. This isn't good for us. We need to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it's a tough question. It's something that only you really know when it's the right time to cut somebody off.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So the next question, it was my turn, I think, right?
Yeah.
What can I do to make my Q realize that what they believe is nonsense? This is a tricky one.
There's nothing you can do.
That's right.
Because if there's one thing that I've learned about people who believe in these QAnon conspiracy theories, it's that they're not believing it because it makes sense to them. They're not believing it because it rationally, and logically adds up in their head. They're believing it because it's providing them with some sort of comfort, which means it's an emotional attachment. And an emotional attachment to something is not rational. It's not logical. You can't use rational thought and logical thought to counter it. You have to approach it from an emotional standpoint. I think that really the only way that you can eventually, potentially, get your QAnon to see reason is to figure out what it is that's what the void is in their life, what they're trying to replace with this comfort that they're getting from QAnon and Q theories. And once you figure that out, you can potentially remedy that. Like for my parents, I think it was loneliness and boredom. And it became worse in the pandemic because in the beginning of the pandemic, my brother and I decided that we were going to stay away from them. Like we were all going to be in our own little bubbles because my parents are seniors and we didn't know what the risk was for them. We just knew that it was, overwhelmingly affecting seniors and they were dying. And like the worst thing in the world that we could think of would be like us giving our parents COVID. So for a while there, we were isolated from them because we didn't want to give them COVID. And we asked them to isolate as well. And they did in the beginning. And so I think that made them extraordinarily lonely and bored. And they had to fill that with something. And it's different for different people. Like we had Sarah, most recently we had Sarah on, and her mom had lost her best friend, her spouse, right? She was alone. She was living alone for the first time in her life when she's had this exciting life up until then, filled with social interactions with all kinds of people. She liked to party. She was a bartender. She used to love to take her kids to Disneyland and all this stuff. And now all of a sudden she's living completely alone by herself in a totally different state from her kids. And it's, or I think most of her kids, I think there was one kid still living near her, but that's a big change. That's a big thing to adapt to. And I think that is why she fell down the rabbit hole. I think people who are fulfilled and who have a lot of things to do with their lives and are busy, they don't have time to fall down the QAnon rabbit hole. They don't, they don't have time to think about this stuff. They're busy. They're fulfilled in other ways. And I think that the only way that you can really talk to them about this stuff with any kind of hope of them coming out of it is by approaching it emotionally, figuring out what's wrong, what's causing the void in their life, and seeing if you can remedy that.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
still a toss up.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is, and I mean, this really depends on the situation that you're in, but many people have said there's no point in arguing with them. There's no point in bringing up counter arguments because that's, they, like you said, you've said a million times, like they just move the goalposts every time. So I think the only other approach would be to listen and try and understand where they're coming from, with the goal of letting them kind of keep saying it until they hear themselves and understand how ridiculous it is, if they get to that point. But, that depends on whether or not you can handle doing that. If it's going to be detrimental to your mental health to do that, then it's not your responsibility.
Yeah, that's kind of the street epistemology model, which of course was, I don't know if it was created or just popularized by Anthony Magnabosco, but you definitely need to check out his channel. I'll put the link in the show notes, but essentially what he does is he approaches people. He generally talks to people more about their religious and spiritual beliefs, and he will approach them in public, and it's super like non-confrontational. Like he's a super nice guy, and it's like the type of guy you want to talk to. So he'll approach them in public and ask them questions about their beliefs. And in many cases, you watch their beliefs kind of unravel as they explain it, because it doesn't make any logical sense. And so that's one way to do it. It's you kind of, instead of being confrontational, you just ask them questions and continue to ask them questions. And eventually they see how kind of ridiculous what they're saying is.
Yeah.
But that, again, that requires a lot of patience and energy, and it's not your job. And you don't have to do that.
You're putting yourself in a position that you're taking on that responsibility, and we all have lives and we all have things we need to do, and jobs and kids and pets and spouses and whatnot. Look, you can't just spend all your time working on that.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you have the energy and you have the will to do that, then more power to you.
Absolutely.
I can't
if
do
the
it.
relationship is that valuable to you, then I mean, you probably want to invest the time, but there probably comes a point where you do need to just look after yourself and go your separate ways or adjust the relationship accordingly.
Yeah, the way I see it with my parents is like, there was a time I might have tried harder, and tried the Socratic method and tried to draw my parents out of this harder than I have. But my first responsibility once I became a mom is to my son. And part of that is making sure that we can pay the bills. So I have to work. And I have to work clear-headed because I'm a writer, and it's very challenging when something's bothering you to write creatively, It's really hard to do that. So I have to make sure that I have a clear mind and that I am putting my family first. I can't put my parents first. I can't do that. It's just, they made choices. They're their choices. And I have other things that are more important that I have to do. But I can see where, like, if it's your child, if it's your spouse, where you might want to try a little harder, because it's more pressing. And I don't know, like, maybe if things were worse with my parents, if they weren't respecting my boundaries and I was forced into a position to either cut them off or drag them out of it, I don't know. Maybe I would put more effort into it. But it's it's up to the individual, I think, who,
Yeah. It
like,
just
what kind
really
of effort you spend.
Depends on the circumstances.
Yeah.
Like
and I think
else.
that it's important to note that if you go on QAnon casualties and you read the stories, you're going to see that 99.9% of them, despite people trying every method possible, stay in it and don't give it up. So no matter how much effort you put into it, no matter which method you try, you probably won't be successful. So you need to decide whether or not you want to put that effort in. If it's probably going to be for no reason.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask the next question again, because this one looks like it's directed at you anyway. Okay. What is the craziest thing your Q parents have said to you?
Oh my gosh, that's hard. But I think probably the one thing that sat with me the most was, there's two things that kind of blew my mind. The first, of course, was that the vaccines had microchips in them that were used to track us.
Yeah.
For so many reasons. Like, I know we've all heard this theory before, but for so many reasons, this is the wildest thing that I heard, because it was like, I can't believe, like, it's a meme almost, right? Like, I can't believe this meme just came into my real life, like, and is affecting my real life now. Like, I can't believe that they fell for this. Like, it's so, it's so over the top ridiculous, like, in so many ways. I can't believe anybody would buy that. Like, give me any reason why you are skeptical of the efficacy of those vaccines, but that one in particular is so ridiculous and crazy. Like, not like we're carrying around our tracking devices in our pockets voluntarily. You know, not to mention the watch. We have Google Home. My parents have iPads. They have computers. They have phones, smartphones. They have a Google Home that they listen to music on. They have a smart TV. Like, all these things are tracking you. All of these things are and they're literally, like, repeatedly asking you if they can track you. Like, every time you go to a website and it's like, allow cookies, I guarantee my parents don't even read that. They just click allow cookies. Like, they're worried about what is in the vaccine when
that's the one that gets me.
Yeah, that's such a good meme. But yeah, it blew my mind that anybody with a functioning brain could actually accept that, you know, we're already being tracked by multiple devices in our house and we're letting them do it. And on a frequent basis, we're saying, yes, please track me on every freaking website we go to. But it's the vaccines we have to worry about because they have tracking devices in them. It's just ridiculous. And
the people that want to track us, like, that's where they're going to focus their energies, on the vaccines, when we're all doing it willingly anyway.
Yeah, they engineered a worldwide pandemic so that they could then justify vaccinating everybody so they could track us when they already were tracking us. Just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It still blows my mind that any single person on this planet could be dumb enough to believe that. And I'm sorry for saying that. I'm sorry, but if you believe that, you are not in any way, shape, or form functioning. Like, it's so ridiculous. But anyways, the second one that really sat with me was when my mom said to me that the Ever Given, you remember that boat that got stuck in the Suez Canal? I think it was a barge.
Yeah.
When she said to me that the barge got stuck in the canal because it was filled with dead children. I was just like, okay, now you need to, like, I don't see the cause and effect here, Mom.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to connect those for me. Like, how does there being dead children in the boat cause it to get stuck? I don't know.
It's a pretty big boat, and those must be some pretty heavy children.
Yes.
I don't know.
I just don't understand. Like, why would it be, like, if it was filled with coal, why would that not get stuck as opposed to children? I don't understand any of this, and none of it makes sense. But yeah, those are the two craziest things that people have said. And the overarching thing that I think is like the craziest thing is that nothing can happen in the news. Nothing happens in the world naturally anymore for them. Like nature doesn't exist anymore. It's not a force anymore. Anything that happens naturally, like the radon thing, right? Like that's what went through my mind when my dad said, I have my own theories about radon. It's like nothing can just naturally happen anymore. It all has to be like some plot by humans, because nature's just dead. It's just gone.
Yeah. It doesn't exist.
The nature as a force left, like in the 60s when they shot JFK.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. These crazy things. So the next question is, how do you find your guests for the podcasts? I'll let you answer that one.
Well, I mean, you've found most of them, or they've reached out to you, or you've reached out to them. But I think the Reddit QAnon Casualties subreddit was kind of where we started. And you reached out to a lot of people there, and many of them didn't reply, but some did, and led to interviews. Others, I think, have contacted us directly. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Yep. Yeah, you said it. I don't have anything to add to that one.
Where are we here? Are you still in touch with all the guests?
Yeah. Yeah, we talk to all the guests every once in a while. After our recap episode, we got a really nice email from Kurt.
Yeah, that was nice. Thanks, Kurt.
Yeah, we were like, wow, that's such a nice email from Kurt. And yeah, we still talk to them every once in a while, usually through email. We haven't really sat down and chatted with them, but we're hoping that in the future we'll actually be able to like bring them on to give their own updates. Hopefully.
Yeah.
We'll see. And if that does happen, it's going to be live on YouTube. So make sure you're subscribed to us on YouTube. Even if you're just an audio listener, the link is in the show notes. Did Hale carry out his plan to go no contact? How is he now? I'll answer this one because I talked to him. Hale went no contact. He sent the email that he was planning on sending, and he moved out, and his parents no longer know where he lives. At least as of the last time I talked to him. I don't know if anything's changed since then, but he did seem happier, and more content. So he has kind of made his own little family with his friends, and I love it. I think that there's nothing more admirable than doing what's right for you, even when it's really, really hard. So
yeah, for sure.
So yeah, we hope that Hale is doing well.
That's good to hear. Very happy about that. Has Kurt had any romantic relationships since he broke up with his Q soulmate?
Yes. We asked him when we interviewed him. And he said yes, he's had a couple of brief relationships. And I think he's dated a couple of times. So he's back. He's getting back out there. So
good.
Yeah. I hope that he finds somebody that is going to make him as happy as he was before all of this craziness happened for him.
Yeah.
Where do we live, John?
Well, without going into exact location, we live in Canada, province British Columbia, and I would say a small town in the interior of BC.
Yes. Near
I'm sure it wouldn't be too
pretty.
hard for somebody to figure out more specifics if they really wanted to, but
yeah, I talk about it a lot on Twitter, but
that's about all I need to say, I think. There's a lake
it's a very
nearby.
small town. Yeah. It's very pretty here. Very wildernessy, and we have like hiking trails like almost right out our front door. So it is it's a nice place to live, and we like it. We used to live in Vancouver, well, just outside of in Richmond, which is where the Vancouver International Airport is, and Delta. We lived
Lower
everywhere.
Mainland, yeah. I grew up in Edmonton originally, Alberta, but haven't lived there in a long time.
And we also lived in Mexico.
That's right. Yeah, a couple of years in Mexico.
Our son was born there. He's our little Mexican guy.
What are your day jobs?
You go first.
All I'm going to say is I'm a project manager. I'll leave it at that.
And he works from home.
And I work from home. Yeah.
And I am a writer, and I write stuff for companies. So like I write their website copy. I write blog posts for them. I do a lot of SEO writing, which is essentially when people want to fill their website with content that Google likes so that they rank on Google for specific keywords. And I write for a beard care company, like a company that makes beard balm, beard oil, all of that. So I write a lot about beards. So I know a lot about beards. And then I also write for a company that does like financial services for seniors in the US. So I also know an extraordinary amount about seniors and their taxes and their insurance in the United States of America, which of course will never come in handy for me. So it's just useless information for me. But
well, it's good. It's good to know in comparison, though, to what we deal with here in Canada.
Oh, I feel so like honestly when I write it, I'm so frustrated. Whenever I write that stuff, I get so frustrated because of the insurance situation down there. Like, I don't understand how people get by with the health insurance situation.
Yeah.
It makes me feel very sad for my American friends.
Are there any boundaries your Q parents could cross that would make you go no contact?
Yeah. If they were outwardly homophobic, I don't think that they ever would be. Because like I said, my dad, I think I've said in previous episode that my dad was a crisis counselor his whole life. He like fought for LGBTQ rights and supported LGBTQ people even in the 70s and 80s. So I really don't think that they would. But you never know with this stuff. Like I also didn't think that they would ever succumb to QAnon. But the LGBTQ that would absolutely be a deal breaker because our daughter is a member of that community and she comes first. Another one would be outward transphobia. I don't want to hear it. I don't know where my parents stand. I hate saying that, like where somebody stands on the transgender issue. It's not even an issue. It's just people, right? Like it's like saying the Jewish question. Like it's just so horrific to say that.
Yeah.
But I don't know where they stand with that. And I don't want to ask because I
No.
feel like I wouldn't like the answer. Sometimes I feel like that. But yeah, if they were outwardly being transphobic, I would probably cut ties.
Yeah.
If they started trying to convince our son or even our daughter, she's older, that's why I say it that way. She's lives on her own. She doesn't see them very often, but our son is very close with them. So if they tried to talk him into believing QAnon stuff, or if I found out that they were like giving him colloidal silver or something else, some kind of alternative medicine without my permission, or if they were giving my dog that kind of thing,
Yeah.
that would be an instant bye. Like,
Yeah.
you're not respecting me. You're not respecting me as an adult, as a mother, as a dog mom. Like, too bad. Bye.
Yeah.
And if they continued to push their beliefs, if they weren't respecting my boundaries when I say I don't want to talk about this stuff, I don't want to hear it. If they kept talking about it, kept bringing it up, then yeah, I'd probably be like, okay, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. I have other things that I have to focus on. So those would be it for me. What about you, John?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add other than, just, to add on to, if they're spending time with our son, and even if it wasn't specific about theories, and I guess this would apply to anything, not just QAnon, but if they were in some way trying to imply that we shouldn't be listened to, or the values that we hold are incorrect, and that or that our son should be careful what he believes from us, implying something like that. And that's not just with QAnon, that's just anything in general. But
Yeah.
that's not to say that we're always going to be right, but that's something that, that's our responsibility to deal with our child and have those discussions.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I don't think that they would, though. I don't think that they would try to. But my parents were always very good with boundaries.
Yeah.
Again, I think probably because my dad was a counselor. It was, I mean, boundaries are a big thing about everybody's therapy. Is like there's parts of it where you're talking about boundaries, and
Right.
so my dad was very, very adamant that we have healthy boundaries and what those healthy boundaries should be. He was always defending our boundaries as a family, even his boundaries as a husband to my mom. Like he was like, no, we need our time and stuff like that. So he always was very much about boundaries, and they seem to be respecting those. I wouldn't, if I thought that they were going to say anything like that to our son, I wouldn't let him hang out with them alone.
Right.
He doesn't spend a lot of time with them alone. He goes for lunch with them every weekend, but that's about it. But it's so far everything's fine. And he's also like really easy to pry things out of. He's not a good liar. He's like almost honest to a fault. So we would know if they were saying stuff. He would tell us.
Yeah.
For sure. This question is for John. What is it like for you seeing the relationship between Courtney and her parents deteriorate because of QAnon?
I mean, it's mostly, I mean, the hardest thing about it is just because I witnessed their relationship before all of this. So I have a good understanding of what's been lost. So it's difficult to, see anyone you care about lose a relationship with a loved one like that. Like if your spouse is father or mother passed away. I think it would be similar like that. There'd be some closure there, but this is kind of like just ongoing, right? Because the people that they were aren't who they are now, and that hurts you, right? And that if it hurts you, it hurts me as well. So I mean, that's, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what it's kind of like. Like I kind of feel it through you, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, they were always a big part of our lives for so long. Like, I mean, we used to do everything with them.
Yeah, they would be around for, I mean, we still get together for holidays and birthdays and things like that, but it would be a little more frequent before. And, we even used to get together with them and have some drinks and hang out and into the later hours of the night. And I mean, we don't drink very much anymore, and they've got a little older and they don't stay out as much anymore. So that's just kind of a natural evolution of the relationship, but it doesn't even feel like something that would be possible now.
Yeah, it also seemed to like it started to deteriorate a little bit before the whole QAnon thing too. And my mom, she's just obsessed with food and nutrition and her diet, and everything has to be special and everything has to be like, she can't come over to my house and eat what I cook. So I just don't want to invite them anymore to eat at our house. It's so challenging to, because so much in Western culture, so much of our social life centers around food. And like whenever we connect with new friends or something like that, we'll invite them for dinner and we cook for them. And it's a joy to be able to cook for them. And I don't have a problem sticking to somebody's dietary needs. But like, it's like my mom refuses to eat anything that I make, and she brings her own food every single time. And then I can never keep up with what my dad is and isn't eating anymore, because, my mom's constantly telling him, oh, you shouldn't eat this or you should eat that. And he'll believe her, and he'll like, oh, today we're cutting out all dairy, or tomorrow we don't eat bread. And it's like, I don't know. And so it's easier to just, we go to a restaurant. They can pick whatever the hell they want off of a menu. It's easier to do that, or to just, I just don't invite them anymore. I just would rather cook for people who want to eat what I'm making.
Or at least have some option. There's something that we could make, but there's nothing that we can all enjoy.
Yeah, I don't mind cooking vegan. Like my mom's vegan. I don't mind cooking vegan at all. Like my brother is also vegan. I love a lot of vegan food. When my brother came for dinner last time, I made him vegan Thai curry, and it was delicious. And I happily would eat that by choice, even if they weren't around. But
no, the vegan, vegetarian, I mean, that's not the issue.
No, it's just that, like my mom, she won't eat stuff that's not organic. She won't eat stuff that, like there's, I'm sure there's vegetables and fruits that she won't eat. There's,
the whole GMO thing.
You can't eat GMOs, and you can't eat anything that is an animal byproduct. I don't know if honey's okay with her. You can't eat. There's just so many things with her, and it's just like, it's impossible. It's impossible to put a meal together for her. So I just don't. That's that. I love cooking. Cooking for me is a joy. It's an escape. It's like a relaxing, almost meditation sometimes. I just love cooking, and I don't want to put up with things that take the joy of cooking away from me. So I won't.
Yeah, and just as an example, like we were watching that show last night, The Patient with
Oh yeah, that was so
Michael
dark.
Michael Scott,
Michael Scott,
Steve
Carell.
Carell,
Yeah,
and there's that scene where his son has become Orthodox Jewish,
yeah,
and he's not, and there's that scene where they're all having dinner together, and then dessert comes out, and his wife, the son's mother, brings out the ice cream cake or whatever it was, and you could see the look in the eyes of the Orthodox kids that they're obviously not allowed to have it, and they're probably feeling pretty conflicted about it, like, why can't I? But also, why are they? This is wrong. You know, you can just kind of read everyone's faces, and it's just obviously just such an issue, like that could be handled differently, right? Like in a
yeah.
situation like that, there's no reason why you would have to have an ice cream cake. You could have something that everybody could enjoy, but there's limits to that, right? You can only go so far, where it's like, how can you even have a meal together?
Yeah, like I said to you last night, it's so easy to serve kosher food. Like there's a lot of kosher food out there. And
and if that's all we were dealing with, like,
yeah,
we could manage that easy. That wouldn't be a problem at all.
yeah. I'd even be excited to try like a new challenge for like that. But it's just like we joke often about the fact that my mom will just go out into the backyard and graze on the grass because it's just like there's like 5 things that she can eat, and they change every month. They change, like this new thing is the bad thing and this other thing is the good thing now, and I can't stay on top of it. And even if I did, like every time I offer to cook something vegan for her or cook something different for her, it's like, no, I'll just bring my own. And just like, okay, you have this need to be the special one. So you go ahead. You can have that attention. But yeah, I just avoid it now. I don't want to invite them for dinner because I just would rather enjoy cooking for people who appreciate what I do.
Yeah.
I think the next question.
Me. I think we've kind of already answered this, but how do you manage living in the same small town as your parents?
It's weird. It's weird, not because like I don't like we see them. We still hang out with them. As I said, we went out for dinner the other night. My mom came and picked up my son yesterday for lunch. We see them. She took the dog. She loves taking little Lucy with her. We see them. We hang out with them. We get along as long as everybody's respecting boundaries. But where it gets weird is the fact that everybody in town knows us and they know them. And they know me on Facebook, and they, it's no secret that I do this podcast, and some of them are probably listening right now. And so in that sense, I feel like it's a little bit awkward for people who might be listening to this podcast who know us and know all of this stuff about us. It's weird. But that said, it's also important to note that I did ask my parents if I could talk about this, and they said yes. And again, I'm sure that they know about this podcast too, because I post about it on my Instagram. My mom follows me on Instagram. So I'm sure they've listened to it. I'm sure that they know about it. We just don't talk about it because it's probably going to bring up an argument. Like one really, really good quality about them is that they've always been able to handle it when my brother and I have an issue with them. They've always been able to handle it, and they've always been able to hear criticism. And our relationship has always remained the same up until the whole QAnon thing. That's really the only thing that's ever really changed it really deeply. but yeah, everything is fine in our family. Like, we get along. I guess it's not fine. Like, obviously I wish that they didn't believe the stuff. They weren't down this rabbit hole. But I think that outside of that, we get along fine. They still see their grandkids. They still are in contact with my brother. My sister-in-law is pregnant. They're going to go see them when the baby is due. We're still kind of chugging along. So anybody in our town who is listening to this and knows us, just know that there's no need to feel awkward about this. Our family has found a dynamic that includes QAnon. But yeah, it's a little awkward to answer the question. Do your parents know about this podcast? I just answered that. I don't know for sure. Like, I don't know for sure, but they have to, right? They have to, because I post about it on
think so.
Instagram.
Like, whether they listen to it all or not, I don't know, but I'm sure that they know about it, and I'm sure that they know that, what it's about.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So, hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. How do you avoid arguments with your parents? I think we've kind of answered that too. We just don't talk about it. I try not to bring out current events. I try not to talk about the war in Ukraine. I don't talk about politics. I don't talk about the news, anything going on in the news.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few things that we can talk about. We will talk about, when we're together, we usually just talk about, like, my parents will often ask how the kids are doing, and we'll talk about how the kids are doing, how our son is doing in school, and how our daughter is doing. She's just started into her second year of living on her own. So, questions like that. And then we usually ask them how the rest of our family is doing, like my mom's brother, sisters. And that's really it. And we talk about people we know in town, and if we've run into them lately, and how they're doing, and just stuff like that. And every once in a while, I find myself, like, I'll be with them, and I'll find myself be like, oh, did you hear about what, like, Jagmeet Singh said to Trudeau the other day in Parliament? And I'll be like, just about to say it, I'll be like, nope, do not say that, because that is a minefield. So yeah, that's how we avoid the arguments. And John, you never argue with them, because you just wash your hands of it.
Yeah. We probably have had conversations at times, but yeah, I would just shut it down.
Yeah.
If it comes up. What do your kids think about your Q parents?
Well, our son loves them. He doesn't, I don't think he cares. Like, he's almost 15. He is, like, completely wrapped up in online gaming. This is his life. It's his world. And he doesn't think about politics. He doesn't think about what's going on in the world. It doesn't matter to him right now. And he's just a normal 15-year-old. So it doesn't really affect him. And I don't want it to affect him, which is why I haven't cut things off. I want my parents to have a relationship with him. They've always been very close, so I would never take that from him unless it became dangerous for him. And I don't think he really sees them any differently. He notices, like, their age, I think. Like, he notices that they may not be as clear thinking as they used to be. But that's about all. that he really notices. I mean, we talked to him about what they believe and why it's dangerous, etc. And he knows all of this stuff, but it just doesn't register
Yeah.
on his.
I mean, I think that it probably does to a degree. Like, he knows, he can sense the tension when we're all together. I think he probably just, like you said, kind of doesn't pay attention to it, but I think he knows it's there.
Oh yeah, he knows. I mean, we've talked to him about it.
Yeah. Yeah. But what I mean that is that tension, like that tension's always there.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not like he's oblivious to it or anything. And when we're all together, like there's going to be that tension, and that's not great for a kid to have to deal with, especially when, it's not his fault. It's not his responsibility,
Yeah.
So kind of sucks, but.
Yeah. And that's why we just make sure that he has a relationship with them still and that everything is safe for him. And I think it's similar to like when I was, I don't know, 18, 19 years old, my grandma had, she had dementia, and she was just not there anymore. Like she just was living in an alternate reality. And at times it was humorous because she would, like, I remember there was this one Easter she came over and she wouldn't sit down until my mom took something from her hands. Like she kept saying, "You need to take this from me." And she had nothing in her hands, and it was bizarre to see that as a kid.
Yeah.
And I remember it was upsetting, but the progression, because when I was really little, I remember her being coherent and there and with it. I remember what she was like. I remember all of these things, and she was one of my favorite people ever. And it was hard to see that progression where she went from this alert, upbeat, fun person who was excited to see me every time to someone who didn't even know who I was and would call me by names I'd never heard of before.
Right.
It's a similar progression that our son is seeing with his grandparents. Although they're not as bad, obviously, as my grandma got in the end. But they are getting older. They're not quite as alert as they used to be or as sharp as they used to be. Hell, I'm not as sharp as I used to be. And so he's seeing that kind of like natural progression of somebody going from an adult in their prime to turning into seniors who might need a little bit more attention and care. And I think that for him, it's just a natural, like he's just seeing it as the same way that I did when my grandma had dementia. For him, it doesn't matter that it's QAnon or anything like that. That's kind of affecting it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Yeah. What is the next question? Are there a lot of QAnoners where you live? I think that there are a few. I remember early on in the pandemic, I was walking Lucy by myself in town, and I saw this poster that had been stapled to like a telephone pole, and it said something about the virus was engineered, and then it had the hashtag
Right, I remember.
Where we go one, we go all. And I was like, what is this? And I took a picture of it with my phone, and I came home and I looked up the hashtag, and I was like, what is this? Like, it didn't make any sense to me. Of course, it still doesn't. Like, there's no sense to be gotten from any of it. But yeah, it was definitely in town. It still is. I mean, we know other people in town who buy into some of these theories. And I would say that it's a small town. It's a small lakeside town in southern interior of BC. And so that means that there's quite a few retirees. So we have a boomer population here. And that means we have a QAnon population here. To put it succinctly.
I don't know what the ratio would be and how that would compare to other towns similar size. But yeah, with a lot of retirees, like you say, they're probably a little more susceptible from what we've learned doing this podcast. That's not to say they all are, but. And then the other thing I would look at is, in Canada when the whole trucker convoy thing happened. I mean, it was pretty big here. I don't know really how to compare it to other cities, other than what we've seen on TV or on the internet or whatever. But I mean, it seemed pretty big. It went for weeks and weeks and weeks. They're going up and down the highway. And that's not to say that everyone that was involved in the trucker convoy is full on QAnon, but there's definitely links there, right?
Yeah.
Because the things that they were upset about, I mean, we're still trying to figure out what that was exactly. And the only thing
they're still protesting. What are they even protesting?
Yeah, I mean, it just made no sense. So, the only conclusion I could come up with is, some of the QAnon nonsense, right? That's just being masked with these other protests that they're putting out there. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely here, but I don't know if it's more here than it is other places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. But we do know a lot of really not QAnon people, very smart people, not that all QAnon people are not smart. But we do know a lot of people here who are more pro science and pro logic, pro rational thought, and know how to find evidence for what they believe. There's a lot of really cool people in this town. It's cool. It's a cool town because there's a lot of people who have relocated from bigger cities. So we have urban liberalism here in abundance. Not enough to stop our MP from being conservative, though. But one day we can hope.
Probably in time as the younger generation takes over more of the voting population. But we'll see.
Yeah. There's hope in the youth.
Where are we here? Would you ever be willing to do an episode about how to talk to your Q?
Yeah, actually, we have been talking about that. If we did do that, we would bring on an expert of some kind because we are not that. And I don't want to, I'd rather give people really accurate information backed by science. So I will bring on an expert. And if we do that, that's going to, again, be posted on YouTube. So you want to go subscribe to us on YouTube. We're hoping to ask some names that you probably know to come and talk to us about stuff like that in the near future. Definitely during season 2 sometime. So go subscribe on our YouTube channel. The link to that is in our show notes. Is QAnon in Canada? Yes, absolutely. Romana Didulo is the queen of it. Although she says she's the queen of Canada. I think she's actually upgraded herself to queen of the world. Romana Didulo is somebody that you should look up if you are looking for something to blow your mind.
I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm not going to, but
she's a QAnon leader here in Canada who has a big following, and her following is people my parents' age, so they're in their 60s and 70s, and she's convinced them that they don't need to pay their utility bills and they don't need to pay their mortgage, and they don't need to pay anything. They don't need to pay their taxes. And people are actually like getting their homes foreclosed on. They are getting their electricity shut off because they have followed her advice. And I think probably the most ridiculous thing that this person has done is, it was last year sometime, she convinced a bunch of her followers to go on down to the Peterborough RCMP detachment, which is, the RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. She convinced them to go down there with the intent of arresting the police officers for crimes during the COVID pandemic, like COVID-related crimes. Who knows?
Yeah.
And that turned out precisely the way you are probably imagining. All of the Romana Didulo followers were the ones who, of course, got arrested. But there's video of that. You can search for that probably on YouTube. There's video of the attempted arrest, citizen's arrest of the RCMP by Romana Didulo QAnon followers. I don't know. Personally, I think that we need to have laws against this sort of thing, because there are people who are, like I said, they're getting their utilities shut off because they're following her advice. And these are seniors who are living in the Canadian winters. They need their heat or they're going to die. Like, this is a crime. This has to be a crime. Yeah. It blows my mind that we don't have any laws anywhere that would say that this was a crime.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
It is.
So yeah, QAnon is in Canada. Very much so. It's everywhere. It's everywhere, guys. It's the only places where it seems to not be very big is in the developing world, where people don't have time.
Yeah.
They're more worried about putting food on their plate than they are who invented COVID. And exactly. It wasn't invented. It was invented by Mother Nature. Yeah, how do you think your parents were radicalized? I just talked about Romana Didulo. I have a suspicion that they might follow her. Because she's been pushing. There was a couple of things that my parents said in emails about the quantum financial system that were very strange, and so I searched for them, like using the quotations on Google, like word for word, and what came up were posts from Romana Didulo followers saying the exact same thing. So I wonder if they follow her. But I think personally it was Facebook. It was Facebook. And my mom always followed the natural, or what was it called? Natural News. The Mike Adams, the health ranger. She did for a long time, even before the pandemic, because she was very much into the alternative medicine and natural remedies. And and he is like prolific in pushing the QAnon bullshit. And he has like over 400 domains, all of them like different websites that are set up like a news. They're supposed to look like a news page, like an official news web page. But he's literally just pushing QAnon theories and all of them. And the Natural News one is about natural remedies and nutrition and health and all of that stuff. But it's kind of like the gateway drug, right. Like they suck you in through that. And then along the side of Natural News, you have links to all of his other sites, like articles with like inflammatory headlines. So it's like clickbait. So you end up clicking on that, and then you end up on his site that is devoted to like gun rights. And then you end up on another site that's devoted to ending Black Lives Matter, stuff like
Right.
that. And I think that's kind of how my mom got sucked into it. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just having too much time on your hands or, spending too much time just, like you said, on Facebook when looking for something to fill some kind of a void, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So the last question we've got, I'm not going to ask the question directly, but we get asked about what we think about certain conspiracy theories, specific ones. And I guess we just want to explain why we don't really go into those. We don't go deep into specific theories. Like we touch on them when they're relevant, but I guess I'm changing the question to say, why don't we? Why don't we go down the rabbit hole of explaining and debunking and that kind of thing?
It's because I don't want to give them any airtime, and they don't matter because that's not the issue. They're entertaining, don't get me wrong. It's entertaining to be like, this is crazy. I can't believe this person believes that. It can be entertaining, but it's also for somebody who has lost someone to these ideas, it's exhausting. Because somebody that they love believes they're real. It's harder to see the humor in it when someone you love believes that is real and true. And then it just becomes emotionally exhausting. I don't want to put I think that the majority of our listeners are people who have someone in their life who they've lost to some kind of extremist thinking. I don't want to put our listeners through that. I personally feel exhausted when I have to talk about theories and debunk theories. I don't want to debunk theories. That gives them, I think, when you spend time trying to debunk those theories, it gives them some kind of credibility. Like they're worthy of the time and effort, and they're not. These are stupid theories. Like they're stupid. I'm not going to mince words. They're absolutely asinine. They do not deserve our time or our attention or our debunking. They don't deserve our effort or our breath. Nothing. They don't even deserve our thought unless we're laughing at it. They're stupid. They're absolutely stupid. And I won't give them airtime. The only time we're going to talk about them ever in our podcast is when one of our interviewees is telling us something that their QAnon loved one has told them. That's when it's relevant, but we're not going to bring them up and discuss different conspiracy theories because they're stupid.
Yeah.
And I don't like spending my time doing stupid shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would just add that, there's other podcasts and other YouTube channels and other people out there that are doing that, and they're doing a great job with that. And listening to it for entertainment purposes is, I do it, you do it. It's up to you if that's what you want to spend your time doing. And if you enjoy that, that's great. For us, we felt that our approach was somewhat unique and something that wasn't being talked about. And we felt that it needed to be. And since we started this podcast, we've had a number of people reach out to us and specifically tell us that this is something that nobody's talking about, and they can't believe that nobody's talking about it. And here we are doing this podcast about it and thanking us for that. And I mean, like I said, other people are debunking them. They're going into the theories, and that's not what we're doing. And for the reasons that Courtney already explained, it's just not what we're about. It's not what this podcast is about.
Yeah, this is about the effects that those theories have on relationships. It's about the relationships, and that's it. It's about interpersonal dynamics and how we cope with losing somebody to something like this. this is not about the theories. But if you do like listening to that and you want to hear it debunked, go listen to the QAnon Anonymous podcast. It's fantastic. Yeah. As I previously mentioned, I find it exhausting to listen to these theories because somebody that I love believes that they're true, and it bothers me.
And I would just add that in the context that we're talking about this, where we're dealing with a loved one or friend or relationship that's negatively affected by this, we've already established that trying to debunk the theory to that person isn't an effective strategy. It is very, 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 very rarely going to change their opinion. So you can go and educate yourself and debunk these theories all you want. It's not, most of the time, it's not going to solve your relationship problem.
Yeah, because it's emotional.
That's right.
Debunking something is an act of logic and rational thought and requires evidence. And all of these things have absolutely no relevance to someone who is attached to something emotionally. They want to believe this stuff. And so when you come out to debunk it, they will move the goalposts so that they can continue to believe it because they want to. They're attached to it. So you can debunk till you're blue in the face. It's not going to help. I mean, maybe once in a blue moon, you might find somebody who will hear you, but most of these people are emotionally attached to these theories, and they're not going to respond to debunking.
Even if you were to convince somebody of one of their theories, and they were to say, okay, yeah, this is bullshit, I agree with you, there's just going to be hundreds more. And it's never going to end. You're going to be constantly just trying to debunk the next one and the next one after that. And it's not going to be successful unless they decide to change their views, or they don't want to believe it anymore, or they truly don't believe it anymore. But like you said, it's emotional. It's not going to come from, going at them with logic. That's not going to have the effect that you're probably hoping, because everybody's probably tried that approach. You tried that approach, and it's just not the way that you're going to find success. I don't think, anyway.
Yeah. And every single person that I've talked to is had the exact same experience as me, where when we tried to debunk it, we sent like for instance, the vaccines. My parents were just trustful of the vaccine. So I sent them thousands and thousands and thousands of words of debunking it. And I used scientific evidence. I linked to scientific studies. And one of the things that a lot of people say about the mRNA vaccines is that they're quote unquote experimental. And so I replied to my mom when she said that. I replied to my mom showing her that mRNA was being studied and tested in the 80s. And I sent her a link to a scientific paper that was outlining a study that they did on mRNA in 1989. There's a date on it. You can't argue that it's experimental when they were studying it in 1989. And it's right there. Any logical person, anybody who's open to reason, logic, evidence would understand that it's not experimental. It's been tested. They know very well how it works. And it would be enough for them to be like, oh, okay, I was wrong. But because she was so emotionally attached to this position, because it gives her this sense of control, right? It gives her a sense of control in a situation, a global pandemic that is terrifying, right? This is how she's coping. She's using this as her way of being able to control something that's uncontrollable. And so she read what I said, and her reply was to completely ignore what I said and say, well, what about this? Please address my point, right? If she was interested in an honest conversation about truth and what is real, she would have addressed my point, and she would have said, okay, it's good to know that. I guess they're not experimental, but I still have concerns about this, this, and this. Instead, she just ignored it. And that's what you're going to find with anybody going down the QAnon rabbit hole, is that they're not hearing you when you're debunking stuff. That is why we don't go too deep into the conspiracy theories. However, we also feel that we have a responsibility to not spread misinformation. So when a conspiracy theory does come up from one of our guests, we try to address it, as you've heard in many of our episodes.
And there's actually parts of our interviews that we've edited out for that reason, that where somebody has said something that we feel could possibly be interpreted as misinformation, even though that's not the way they're meaning it, but we don't want that to be misinterpreted that way.
Yeah. That is the last question. I want to thank you for watching this special episode of the Q Dropped podcast. And I want to remind you that you can support this podcast and ensure that we can keep doing it by becoming a patron. The link is in the show notes. And a huge thank you to all of our existing patrons. Without you, we would not be able to do this, because it is getting more and more expensive every week. And next week, we are starting season 2 with 2 brothers whose QAnon father, ran for office in Colorado. That is a very interesting story. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure that you're subscribed on your favorite podcast platform and or YouTube. And you'll be notified when that goes live. And thank you very, very much for listening.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to season 1, and we're looking forward to season 2.